Welcome to Deep Thought. Balance between carnal and spiritual needs. Now, that's actually been the secret of my whole relationship type of program, my development program. I mean, it might not be obvious from listening to some of the videos that I do maybe on my men's channel or a woman's channel, but it all comes down to that one thing. It's just I'm just hitting you with different aspects, and sometimes I'm just doing just pure commentary, not even hitting that. But when we start talking about my books and how much money Rom's getting, how much y'all paying Rom, then we get more into that balance. But that's the key. See, understand, people have two sex drives. They have two sex drives. One is the obvious one, the lust, the carnal need, the physical gratification. But then there's another one to connect with someone on an emotional level, even men. Like women, it's more obvious with women that need to connect. That's how a lot of guys get in their friend zone. But even with men, even though it's poorly expressed, in general, many men find that one woman they can connect with emotionally, and it's a different thing. That's why in general, men, if they fall in love harder, because there is an emotional connection that's not as easy for us. We're not really built for that as much. But then, that's part of the dance of male and female energies anyway. And I'm gonna say energies because of course, there's some people, on the same sex thing. But even in that case, it's still the whole masculine and feminine. One's going to be more masculine, one's going to be more feminine. So even in those cases. But one of the things is people out here have a lean towards one or the other. Like many people have a lean towards the more carnal side of relating. They the ones like most concerned about someone's physical appearance, looks, the physical gratification. But then you have some people, they more on the emotional connection. Now, ultimately, some people suppress one, they suppress one, emphasize the other. But ultimately, what we want is a balance. A balance between the carnal side and what I call the spiritual side. Reason, like I explained in the last podcast, that spiritual isn't necessarily a doctrine thing. It's the intangible. It's your personality. It's your spirit, your subconscious, the intangible things. It's the spirit is the software program running the hardware program. And I'm going to get into that aspect in my next podcast. But what happens is, when people relate, since they emphasize, the norm is to emphasize one over the other. When they relate, it causes a future conflict because you still have that other side that's being repressed. So, for example, when people relate on just a pure physical basis, they relating because, that person is very attractive, or that person has money, or that person has material goods, and which is just like dealing with the material side is just an outgrowth of the carnal. It's the outer, it's the physical, it's what you can touch. They might have that, but then they start realizing after a while, it's like, we don't get along. Like you get some people they meet. Here's a great example. They get some people they meet. They have a strong physical passion. And, for the first few months, they like jackrabbits, got the Star Trek music going, dun, 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 making love and everything and boning. More like boning. There ain't no love involved sometimes. But then, and they might relate based on, they might have some material things together. Okay, cars, they share, even the money part. But then after a while, they looking for something. They like, okay, this ain't enough. Because after a while, you get tired of it. One thing about the carnal part, you got to keep up the same level of physical stimulation that you had at the beginning of the relationship. The more that degrades, boom. Now, You get some people, they might relate more on the spiritual thing, more on the intangible thing. It's like the two people, they get together, they really don't have a strong physical passion. Like you have some cases where maybe two friends would get married. And it's like, yes, they click, they can talk, everything, cool, hang out, on that level. But then there's no physical attraction, or it's very limited. They might have, you get that in cases where the sex life is non-existent. Like you get cases where, and women are famous for doing this, they love a guy, but they're not in love with him. A lot of women might marry a guy because, they like his intangibles. Not necessarily his money, but they might say, you make a good father, we get along, we laugh together. But, when they're looking at each other physically, it's like, they ain't feeling each other on that. But they'll try to make it work, but then the relationship will lack passion. It will lack passion. There will be something missing. And then usually those cases like that, as soon as somebody comes into the picture where there's a physical attraction, that's often where you get infidelity. And just for the record, you still get it in cases where there's still a carnal attraction between people. Because remember, you can't keep up that stimulation. You can only keep it up for so long. I give it 6 months. Maybe even 3 months, depending on how intense it is. And then a person might cheat in that case because they looking for that same level of intensity. It's like a drug user or an alcohol user. After a while, their bodies get used to it, so they look for something new to switch it up, to excite it. They look for that next hit. And that's in a carnal case. In a spiritual case, of course, the carnal wasn't there as much. So as soon as that person comes across, boom. If you look at like exotic dancing for males or females, well, especially for females, a lot of times they go to those places because they don't express those desires, and they don't express those desires in a physical thing, in a regular basis. Now, for what has to happen is you can't really get rid of both, because some people, well, the carnal people, they don't care anyway. They really don't. But then you get the spiritual people say, well, you shouldn't be all carnal and stuff. And, you got whole systems out here, even some sects of different religions who will say, well, you got to suppress that. The thing is, you can't. Because that's the very force that drives us to mate anyway. So you can't suppress that. That's a primal force. You can't. You put a male and female together. Don't expose them to pornography. Don't tell them about sex. You put some young people together once they reach puberty, and you say they grew up in an insulated environment, in a dome or something, where they're not shown any sexual images. Sex is not explained to them. They don't even see animals having sex. But you put them in that environment. Wait till they hit puberty. They're going to find a way. That's how powerful it is. The instinct is going to take over. That's how powerful it is. So you can't really get rid of that, but you can manage it. And that's really the purpose of the spiritual anyway, to manage it. Not suppress it, but manage it. And that's the key to power. Because that energy gives you power. The carnal energy gives you power to move in the world, to have agency in the world. That's the thing, that's the drive. That drives our personality on a subconscious level. But then if you have the spiritual, that modifies. It's like a flamethrower controlling the flame. And actually going back to Kemet, otherwise known as Egypt, that was the meaning of the Sphinx. The head of a man and the body of an animal. That was like the coming together of those two things. And then that's the power. So the key to life, and not just for sexual relationships, but life period, is the balance. Balancing the two, where they're working off of each other. Is the Tower symbol of yin and yang. Of, the black and white circle going in circles. That's the power. If you can balance those two things, that's where the power comes. So, something to think about. I'll get back with y'all later. Peace and many blessings.